Yakuza have existed for 500 years. They survived feudal Japan, American occupation, modern law enforcement, and globalization. And through all of it, they lived under a code so demanding that most people wouldn't last a week inside it. But not because they are violent. Because they understood something about human nature that most of us still don't. They knew that inside every person a war is being fought. Between what you owe the world and what you actually want. Between your obligation to everyone around you and your own heart. They even gave this war a name, 2 names. And if you have ever said yes when you meant no, that war has been going on inside you for longer than you realize. You said yes again. You knew before the words left your mouth that you didn't want to. You felt it that half second, where the real answer existed before the automatic one replaced it. And then you smiled. And you said yes. And you lay in bed afterward, running the calculation of how much of yourself you have spent this week on things that were never really yours to carry. Maybe it was your family, maybe it was your boss, maybe it was a friend who stopped asking and started assuming because you have never given them a reason not to. And somewhere inside that, not loudly, just as a quiet fact you return to at inconvenient hours, is a question you haven't answered in a long time. When did I last do something only because I wanted to? You are not weak. You are not a pushover. You are living under a law that was written before you were born, and no one told you it existed. The Yakuza knew this law by name, and what they understood about it might be the most honest thing anyone has said about the human condition in 5 centuries. Let's go into the machinery of why you keep saying yes. When human beings encounter a social threat, disappointment, rejection, the withdrawal of approval, the nervous system has 4 possible responses. You know fight, you know flight, you know freeze. But there is a 4th response almost no one talks about. Psychologists call it the Fawn response. The automatic move toward pleasing, accommodating, adjusting, not because you want to, but because somewhere early in your life, your nervous system learned that safety comes from making other people comfortable. This is not a character flaw. It is a survival strategy that worked once and never got updated. It disguises itself as virtue, as kindness, as loyalty. The Fawn response wears the face of everything society tells you to be, and so you never question it. You wear the face and call it your own. Every time you say yes when you mean no, your brain registers a debt cleared, a threat neutralized, a small safety purchased at the cost of a small piece of what you actually wanted. Do this enough times and the accounting becomes invisible. You just say yes and move on. And wonder at 2 a.m. why you feel so tired when you have not stopped moving. There is a Japanese concept for this debt, for this invisible accounting that runs beneath every relationship, every obligation, every yes you have ever spoken to. Avoid a consequence you were afraid of. It is called Giri, and the Yakuza built an entire civilization on understanding exactly what it does to a human being. But here is what most people miss about the Yakuza. It was never about violence. It was about something far older and far more precise. 500 years ago in feudal Japan, a code began to crystallize among the outcasts, the people who lived outside the official social order and had to construct their own. This code had 2 forces at its center, 2 forces in permanent, irresolvable tension. The first force is Giri, obligation, duty, the invisible contract you signed by belonging. Giri is not a feeling, it is a law. It does not ask whether you want to fulfill it. Among the Yakuza, this was absolute. Loyalty to the Oyabun, the patriarch, the father figure above all else, above comfort, above preference, in extreme cases above survival. The relationship is called Oyabun Kobun, father and child. You receive protection, belonging, identity. You give everything else. The second force is Ninjo, human feeling, the heart, your desire, your grief, your actual will operating beneath all obligation. Ninjo is not weakness, it is the irreducible human interior that no code, no clan, no contract can fully extinguish. It is the part of you that still knows what it wants, even when you have spent years not listening to it. The Yakuza did not pretend this tension did not exist. They named it. They understood that a man lives inside this conflict every day, and that the only question is whether he lives there consciously or unconsciously. There is a phrase that passes through Yakuza culture like a stone through water. Giri is heavier than a mountain. Death is lighter than a feather. This is not glorifying violence. This is an honest accounting of what it costs to live entirely under obligation and still choose to do it. The Yakuza knew the price. They paid it with open eyes. Now consider the average person living under modern Giri. They are paying the same price. The mountain is just as heavy, but they are carrying it without knowing it has a name. Without knowing they agreed to carry it. This is the difference between the Yakuza and most people. Not the violence, not the crime, the consciousness. They knew what they signed. Most people never read the contract. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because once you see the contract, you also have to see what you have been telling yourself about it. Here is what the mask looks like from the inside. You tell yourself the obligation is chosen, that the yes you give is your genuine yes, and not a yes shaped entirely by what happens when you say no. But here is the question that cuts through all of that. What is the worst thing that happens if you say no? Not the practical consequence, the felt one. The thing your nervous system anticipates in the half second before the automatic yes arrives. Is it guilt? Is it the image of someone's disappointment? Is it the terror, quiet, old, almost pre-verbal, of being excluded from something you need? Whatever it is that is your Giri, not the obligation itself, the fear underneath it. The Yakuza couldn't take the mask off either. That is not the point. The point is, they knew it was there. They lived in the tension with their eyes open. Most people live in the tension with their eyes closed, feeling the weight, without knowing what they are carrying, wondering why they are exhausted by a life that looks, from the outside, like exactly what they chose. You cannot put down what you cannot see. You cannot choose what you have never named. The practice is not to destroy Giri. That is not possible, and not the point. Some obligations are real, some debts are genuine. The yes you give inside them is a real yes chosen, not compelled, freely given rather than fear extracted. The practice is to find the seam. One question. Before each yes that costs you something, am I doing this because I have chosen this obligation or because I am afraid of what refusing it will cost me? These are not the same one thing. The first is conscious Giri, chosen, owned, paid, with open eyes. The second is the Fawn response in a suit. The mountain you are carrying without having agreed to carry it, toward a safety that never quite arrives, no matter how many times you deliver. The man who knows his Giri is chosen is free even inside the obligation. He has power in the yes because the yes came from somewhere real. The man who cannot distinguish his Giri from his fear is owned by both and free of neither. One question every time, just the one question. That discomfort you feel the first time you pause before saying yes, that is not a warning to stop. That is your Ninjo making itself known. Go to the comments. Tell me one obligation you are carrying right now that you never consciously chose. Not the name of the person, just the shape of it. One sentence. I read everything. I respond to everything. Because this weight, The weight of the unsigned contract is something most people carry alone. It doesn't have to be. The Yakuza sign in blood, literally. A visible, permanent acknowledgement that the cost is real and there is no pretending otherwise. You signed without a ceremony, without a cut. You just grew up inside the obligations, absorbed them as the shape of things, and one day realized you had been paying for years toward a debt whose original terms you never read. That difference between the mountain you chose and the mountain that simply appeared on your back is where your life actually is. And somewhere underneath all of it, your Ninjo is still waiting. It has not left, it does not leave. It simply waits, with the patience of something that knows it cannot be permanently extinguished, for the moment you are ready to ask what it has been trying to tell you. That is the next room, and the contract there is one only you can write.